Hey everybody, welcome to our All Analytics Facebook chat today. We've got a fantastic topic, creating great data visualizations. It's not enough to create them, you've got to create great ones. The ones that are impactful, ones that are going to get your message across in the quickest and best way possible. Joining us today are Beth Schultz, who's Editor-in-Chief of All Analytics, Tricia Underwood, President of And Data, and Ben Zenik, who's COO of Zenkos Consulting. I'm Michael Steinhardt, by the way, I'll be your moderator. Just as a quick housekeeping note, we're on the live chat, we're talking to you via video, but we're also in the chat room. If you look underneath the video window, you'll see two tabs. You'll see social stream and chat. Click on chat and talk to us. Send in your questions for the guests. We're going to respond to some of them, or at least as many as we can, while we're on the broadcast. And all of the guests, Beth and Ben and Tricia, will join us in the chat room after the 30-minute mark. So we'll continue the conversation there. So get your questions in now, get your questions in later. Stay with us and continue the conversation. Now, if you're a fan of All Analytics, then you know Beth. If you're new to this site, I'll tell you that Beth is an award-winning IT journalist and business expert, and she's got more than 2 decades of experience covering the industry. Now, Tricia Underwood, who is president of And Data, is a self-proclaimed SaaS BI evangelist. She's passionate about sharing information design tips, programming tricks, and other SaaS programming knowledge through her blog, which you can find at bi-notes.com. She's got 2 books out right now, Building Business Intelligence with SaaS, Content Development Examples. That came out with co-author Angela Hall back in February. And a second book, also co-authored with Angela Hall, is The 50 Keys to Learning SaaS Stored Processes. That came out in April. When she's not writing books, Tricia's busy spreading the SaaS gospel to corporations who need to understand how to transform their data into meaningful charts, meaningful reports, meaningful dashboards using business intelligence solutions. She's got a background in technical writing, process engineering, and customer service. So long story short, she's the one who's going to help us understand how to make impactful presentations. Ben Zenik, who's a COO, that's Chief Operating Officer at Zenkos Consulting. He specializes in data warehousing and online analytical processing architecture. He's got over 15 years of consulting and application development experience. He's an international speaker and trainer in data warehouse integration, OLAP, and web channel customer analysis. So he can help us on the database side in making sense of the reams of data that we have. Ben's industry expertise includes state and local government, retail, media, entertainment, telecommunications, and multinational markets. So we're very honored and very excited to have Tricia and Ben with us today. Welcome, everybody. And Beth, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael, and let me extend my welcome to Ben and Tricia as well. Thanks, you guys, for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's start with kind of a scene-setting question. You know, I would imagine that as BI and analytics consultants and developers working with data for many, many years, the idea of delivering insight in visual format isn't so new to you, right? But tell us, how has today's environment changed your perception about data visualization? You know, has it really? And if so, how and why?
Sure. So as I think the years have gone by, what we've seen is we've seen expectations of these very aesthetically pleasing graphs and graphics that people want to report on in terms of infrastructures, and challenges that you see are the increase in data volume. So even though you still want to have your bar chart or your line chart with months of data on it, the challenges that I think people are now encountering is how do you do that with the larger and larger data volumes that people are encountering now that it's easier to collect data, cheaper to store data.
Tricia, would you say you're seeing the same?
Exactly. I mean, if you think about it, I don't want to say when I started in the field many years ago, but just being able to have an Excel chart and get a bar chart out there was, you know, really a big deal. And now it's just very easy to make moving charts and to have indicators that can brush and affect the rest of the screen. So that's been like one of the major changes just even in the last 2 or 3 years.
Does that mean that you have to sort of pull yourself back as you're thinking about the data visualizations and not go too crazy?
Uh-oh, you caught me. I think that's probably one of the dangers of these tools is that as a data analyst, it's so much fun to create that. And when I show it to other data analysts, we're all excited and talking about it, and to the point that I think we don't even look at the data. We're just watching the screen go by. And I think Ben and I've kind of seen this a couple of times where we're working with customers and they don't notice that the data's not right because they're having so much fun just playing with the tools.
Okay, so that sounds like it could be a big problem.
It definitely can be, and it typically is, because I think the customers are so excited by all this great, exciting new technology that they do forget to sort of look and validate at what they're viewing from a data perspective. And I think it obviously creates challenges both from a project perspective in terms of, our goal is to make sure at first and foremost that what we're presenting to our customers is valid, accurate, and correct. And we even sometimes, as part of that, get lost in, oh, look, I can slide this graph, I can, drill, I can make all these different data presentations, but at the end of the day, if the data is not accurate, it doesn't matter how great these visualizations are.
So let me ask this question. You talk about sliding, sliders and all that. So you're talking about making data visualizations interactive. So traditionally, if we think about a data visualization, how do you define greatness? And how does that compare to what we think about in terms of great data visualizations today? Do they have to be sort of that interactive, have that interactive component to be kind of great, or is it really dependent on the data that you're trying to represent?
I actually think it might be dependent on the user that you're trying to present the data to, more than the data you're trying to represent at some level. So, and Tricia can kind of elaborate on this too, but as you look at who are these data visualizations intended for, you're really trying to represent data for different levels of skills or even different personas. So at an executive level, a static graph that just shows how do I look today or versus yesterday or some aspect of time may be enough, whereas you kind of get into more of that analyst role, I feel, and I think Tricia will concur, that they need more interaction with the data because they're looking kind of beyond what do I look like right now into why do I look like this.
Yeah, I agree.
So when you talk about a data visualization and you're getting started, what are sort of the most important thing that BI and analytics practitioners need to know as they start those projects, as they start to think about delivering data visually?
And I have a slide package ready to kind of share with everyone. And one of the things that I really hadn't thought about, I saw this when I was at the SAS Global Forum, and people forget how powerful how your eyes are. And your eyes are so much quicker than your brain. And for instance, when the chart shows, already before you even had time to think about it, you pulled out every one of these little peach circles or squares, and you notice here's what's different, you notice a different shape, or you look at a pattern, and probably your eyes were trying to figure out something. Is there a pattern to all of the different peach flavors? And I think this came from Colin Ware in his information visualization book. But when you think about how powerful the eyes are, that's what you want to take advantage of in a data visualization. So if you go to the next chart, or the next slide, sorry, you have to use your eyes. So when you've got a table of data, it's very difficult to understand where there's a problem. Whereas if I show you the chart, immediately you zero in on the Q3 green line and you want to know, oh, well, what's happened there? And that gives you a place to go start looking at data. But kind of on the flip side of that is also that to remember, like if you go to the next slide, you have to know when a table is better. Because sometimes when you're trying to compare things, like with this one, it's actually easier to look at the numbers than to try to look at the bar chart and figure out, oh, company B is like twice as much and company C didn't even make a showing in this. So those are some of the things that I think you just have to go back to basics and think about, what can I let the eyes show and when do I maybe resist that urge?
Go back to the basics. That's always good advice, I would say, right? Don't get carried away.
Exactly.
So Tricia and Ben, do you have any rules of thumb that you like to give your clients, as you talk about what type of visualizations um, about their data and what types of visualizations are best suited to what types of data?
Right. So I don't know if you guys watch Mad Men or not, but Don Draper is probably my favorite character on there. And many times he's telling his protege Peggy to change the conversation. And one of the things I notice that goes on with design is I'm always asked, well, is this a good chart or is this a bad chart? And sometimes there's not a clear question. So what I want to do is change the conversation. So instead of it being good, I'd like to use the word effective. Instead of it being bad, I'd like to use the word ineffective. And the reason that I want to do that is when you start thinking about maybe even graphic design. So in the English language, for example, we always read left to right. So if you center text on a page, it's more difficult to read. Thus, it's ineffective. But if it's left-centered or left justified, that's effective. It's easier for the person to read that. So not good or bad, not right or wrong, but effective versus ineffective. And I've got some other charts to kind of support this. So this is a chart, if you go to the next slide. I use Clicky to look at my web stats for my blog. And one of the little things they offer is this little pie chart. And I am not a big pie chart fan, but the way this one works is that you can click on any of the pie slices and it'll slide out and it will highlight in the bold to let you see which slide it's doing. I don't think this is an extremely effective way to do this. It's not horrible because you really can figure it out, and probably the information here, I can look over at the side and see it, so it's like, well, maybe the pie chart isn't necessary. But if you go to the next chart, and you can see the way that one is done. I've done this one as a horizontal bar chart, and I've highlighted your browser in green. And you can see instantly, I can already tell Internet Explorer 8 is what most of the people are using. I can compare it. I can see exactly where I am. And that's maybe a more effective way to do that. But it may depend on what you're doing, because if it's just the pie chart, sometimes it works okay, sometimes it doesn't work okay.
So Tricia, I think that's an important point. And watching the chat over here, somebody kind of was questioning whether or not all pie charts are probably effective or not, or are they all ineffective? And I think one of the keys about pie charts is if you have a small cardinality of data, maybe between 3 and 5 distinct types of categories in your data, then a pie chart can be effective. But when you start looking at something, even I think your graphic has about 10 to 12 different levels of cardinality there, your pie charts become less effective because it's really hard to understand what it's saying and actually find the values that you're looking for without actually having to drill into it. So, at a top level, any graph, I believe that graphs are effective when you don't have to necessarily take a next action to get the results that you want. And I believe with a lot of the pie charts, when you start getting into really detailed levels of cardinality in your data or various categories in your data, it's really hard to just look at a pie chart and determine what it is you're looking at.
Right, Ben. Right, exactly, and that's what I mean by effective versus ineffective. Because if we went back to that was good or bad, you would have taken that as, well, that's bad. That's a bad pie chart, and maybe it just wasn't effective for the situation you were in. Right. And that's the reason I like to use effective versus ineffective.
And I think that's a good distinction. I like that as well. So effective and ineffective, no longer will you see me writing anything about good or bad.
Well, and you might hurt somebody's feelings, which we're all really concerned about too. So, so your chart is bad.
Kind of going on what you had said when we opened up this conversation and building on your last points, we see a lot of data visualizations today, and some of them are really fantastic looking. I mean, they look beautiful. When you create a visualization, whether it's that big beautiful thing or something as simple as a pie chart, I mean, how are we sure that it's delivering the insight we want it to be delivering? Especially, like you said, as we started, there's that temptation to go a little crazy with today's sophisticated tools.
Yeah, I think typically in our, just kind of a pure project methodology, it's really important to work with our customers, and you know, if you're a consultant out there, your customers are internal with your internal organization, to really first pinpoint what are the metrics that you're looking at, and what do those metrics mean across the board. So you have to have some standardized definition of a metric, because to me, revenue, and we've encountered this recently, revenue may be one thing to somebody, but to somebody else it means something totally different. So regardless of how nice or fancy the visualizations look, and how much interaction they have or don't have, really getting down to what the definition of the metrics are that you're looking at in these visualizations is where you need to start. And to do that, you really need to be able to level set with the entire organization, or if you're looking at departmentally, a department within the organization, to get everybody on the same page. Because what you see a lot of times is you build this visualization, you have maybe 2 or 3 people's inputs into it, but at the end of the day, everybody is expecting, all beyond those 3 people, everybody else is expecting it to mean or to have a different definition. So whether I'm using a pie chart or a dynamic visualization or some static bar chart or a line chart, which is really good for representing time series, if I don't get those metric definitions right, and kind of take a chunk, small chunks off at a time, especially if this is new to people, then it's really, really hard to represent anything of value to the end users.
That's true, and to build on that point, Ben, you really have to also have a standard data language that you use. Because I've worked with customers where one department would call it their projected numbers, one would call it the forecasted numbers, one would call it their plan, and you wouldn't think that would be so confusing till they started talking and realizing that projected didn't even mean the same thing to all of them. And you've got to standardize that language almost first off, it can be a battle in and of itself.
Right.
We were talking in the context of data visualization, but really, again, going back to the basics, this is what you would do regardless of whether you were going to presenting the data visually or not, right? I mean, so it's just those common, I hope, common best practices extended into the visual world.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is something that you'd have to do whether or not you were building a table with just data, or a nice data visualization that somebody is going to interact with, or a static visualization. It's a requirement. I mean, if you can't get the basics down of what is it that we're trying to visualize, or what is it we're trying to report on, it really, at the end of the day, doesn't matter what you're using to do your reporting, because it's not going to be of value to anybody.
Even if you've got sort of that level set, everybody's on the same page with their data language and what the metrics mean, how do you keep folks from trying to present either, one, too little information in that visualization, or too much information in that visualization?
I think it's an iterative process, and I think a lot of people think, just like if they're writing a book, I'm going to write this one time and it's done and everyone's going to love it and it's going to be great. And what I've found instead is that sometimes you'll go through 4 to 6 iterations of a report or a dashboard, and I actually don't mind that. I think that's when the team is really working together and everyone's gelling and coming to the right spot. It's worse when you create a report and everyone says, well, that's great, now you can go away, because you know that they aren't going to use it, they didn't like it, and they won't even tell you why. So they shouldn't be afraid of that iterative process with some of these graphics.
And I think to Trisha's point there, when we are implementing a project, we make a conscious effort as part of our requirements and design to actually incorporate prototyping and iterative development that early on in the process, because you don't know for one user what's too much or what's too little, and you don't know for one organization what's too much and what's too little. So for us, it's pretty important to identify that up front, because we don't want to get to the end of a project and not be delivering what the customer is expecting. So it kind of does a couple things. It lets you identify what is a visualization to this organization, but it also lets you identify and get true alignment on what the expectations are of the end customer. And when I say customer, that could be internal as well, for those of you that work within a department or within a company. But as a consultant, that's my end client. It's really important to make sure that everybody has the same expectation and everybody, as we mentioned, knows what the definitions are. But even from a visual perspective, nothing, you can't say too much about having a good mock-up as you go through that process and letting them start to visualize what it is you're going to deliver.
When we're talking about creating these visualizations for clients, are you sort of doing, I don't want to say double duty, but if you're delivering some information to executive management versus line of business managers versus other people in our organization, are you taking that data and creating multiple visualizations from it, depending on your audience then? Or are you trying to create a single visualization that meets the needs across the board?
We try and I think it's very difficult to create one single visualization that meets the needs across the board. But I believe what you can do is you can create a level of a visualization that is useful for everybody, and by user persona have different paths that everybody can take through that visualization. So, a lot of the different technologies allow you to create different types of views of the same data, not only the same data, but the same type of graph, and provide different functionality into those graphs based on the user as well. So maybe, maybe as an executive, you give them the right or the permissions just to look at, the bars on a graph or the line on a graph, but an analyst who would need to get into more detail on that same graph may have the ability to expand the segments of time. And so we try as much as possible not to create too many reports. And if you have certain technologies out there, you can actually leverage the same report for various users. And I think that the important thing there is, though, we don't want to overwhelm the user with 50 reports where you may have one that can be a starting point that drills into additional reports as something that satisfies many users.
Tricia, is that what you find as well?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Ben, you talked about it, and previously too, but just recently you talked about tools and technologies. Do you guys have any recommendations, or what kinds of things are you finding out there that you think are useful in terms of creating data visualizations?
Yeah, I think that a lot of our customers, being a SaaS partner, we have a lot of customers that are using SaaS for business intelligence and analytics. And so, we have a lot of customers that are pleased with sort of the visual aspects that SaaS can provide from a reporting perspective. I think, as we go and we're learning more about some of the future things that they have, I think people are even getting more excited as you look at, the visual analytics that they're providing now too, which is a very exciting product, which I believe gives the ability to create a single visualization that can be leveraged by more personas than you might be able to do today with some of the more standard BI technologies, and in a quicker amount of time too, without having to create all these static views. Because the idea and where we're heading in this industry in general is, how do I get as much data into the hands of the end user in as fast of a time as possible? And so these visual analytics tools, these high performance analytics tools, which allow you to visualize the data, are really starting to put more capabilities into the end user's hands than we've seen in the past, where you don't have to create as many static type of visualizations, because the dynamic ones can be used as static based on the types of performance that you're seeing.
Right.
So then, do these visualizations, do they then become available through your dashboard?
Right. So your dashboard would be the entry point for your visualizations. So you still have your concepts of your indicators. You have your concepts of your line graphs, which are we like to use for time series, bar graphs where you're looking at different categories. But the capabilities that they provide to have very large volumes of data behind the scenes without having to pre-aggregate and summarize data to be represented in reporting basically allows a couple things. It allows more timeliness of data to be in the hands of the decision makers, and it also allows more interaction with the data, because you as a developer, as a consultant, don't have to predefine every view that the end user is going to want to have as they look at the data, because it's so dynamic, and it allows them to create more interactive hierarchical analysis or dimensional analysis as they're looking at these reports.
Exactly. I also wouldn't be afraid to even use like if I was just modeling up, even just use pencil and paper and start trying to lay out how I might want things to look, or Excel. If you've got just a small amount of data and you just want to have an idea of, how's the time, like how a time series might look, or something like that, you can just use some of these tools to play with and help with your mock-ups. Because when I was talking about the iterative process, I'm not going to want to design like 10 big cubes every 3 days to try to meet all of these different needs. So the paper, PowerPoint, Excel would give me a way to get through some of those iterative processes a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. That's a whole sort of storyboarding type of a concept applied to data visualization.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, when you go into clients today, are they asking for data visualizations? I mean, have we gotten to that point yet?
They're asking for graphs. They're asking for reports. We see various skill sets and various levels of customers, and some are more sophisticated than others. Some know what they want. Some have no idea what they can do, and so it really varies. I mean, you do have some that really that know exactly what they want, and they want a specific look of a visualization, and then you have some that they're really looking for you to guide them in that conversation. And you have users that are extremely sophisticated from an analytics perspective, and I think one of the things that we're seeing and that we're able to do with the visualizations, and we like to do as we guide our clients through this, is how do you take some of that analytics and truly represent them through data visualization to a user that doesn't understand analytics.
Right. I thought that one, the 10 points of dashboard development that was you guys had on the site, I think it was last week or the week before that really had some excellent points. And his first point, what I see is a lot of people use the dashboard term generically. And sometimes you really have to figure out what they're talking about, because to me, dashboard is very specific. It means I've got KPIs. I have a very specific idea in my head what it is. But I'll be talking to them and I realize they're talking about a report, not a dashboard. And so you have to go through some education with them as well to standardize the language again, right?
Okay. Let me ask one more question, then maybe we can take some questions from the chat board. We've talked a lot obviously, about data visualizations today and how to get to this sort of state of greatness. How much does collaboration between the IT and the business and the analysts come into play here? Is it more of an imperative when we're talking about sort of using these high-end fast tools to serve up the data and visualize it kind of in real time?
It's a must. You have to have collaboration. I think that's one way that a project can be guaranteed to fail would be without having collaboration across the business and IT, and make sure that everybody's speaking the same language. I talked a little bit earlier about expectation setting around what is it that the customer is expecting to see and what are we creating. I think the same thing is it goes from an internal perspective. If you can't create alignment and set the right expectations between IT and business, and a lot of the visualizations are being used by IT now as well, and you have more business that's managing IT processes. So I personally feel it's a must to have collaboration between those two parts of an organization.
I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a author, Wayne Eckerson, but he was talking about the purple people. And he was saying, like, business people, if you colored them red, and IT people, if you colored them blue, you have to have this mixture, the purple person, who can talk both worlds, who can understand it in both ways. And I thought that was a really good analogy for, like, yeah, these purple people are really essential to all these processes.
So Wayne is with TWI, right? The Data Warehouse Institute, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So I'll be talking about effective or ineffective visualizations as well as the purple people now.
Yeah, right.
Michael, do we have any questions to take from the live audience?
We do, actually. Just want to thank Beth and Tricia and Ben for this fantastic conversation. A couple of interesting questions came in. I think we have time for maybe one or two. One of the audience members said, have you ever encountered a need to use animated visualizations? specifically animations. Why or why not?
I like to use the animas. I can't even say on a dashboard is the way I've seen them used, and it works really well if you've got maybe the mobile product because the executives like to play with that. But what we had was just a line chart that showed how the web traffic had come in over time, and when you clicked on each of those, each little week, a chart would come down below, and it would tell you how much traffic had been that week, what segments it came in, and then a comparison to the week before and the year before. So that way, just dragging your finger across the chart, you could just learn, and you could go back and check this and that. And then it could also affect, I didn't have it set up this way, but we could have changed it so it could have affected some of the other charts around it, which was really cool, and I enjoyed creating it.
And you can watch how time passes and how performance changes over time as well, right?
Exactly.
I think it's beneficial in that, like, so I see something about animation versus interactive. I think animated, Michael, to your point, is nice when you have something that is kind of in a near real time type of a setting where you're loading data and it's being updated more near real time, as opposed to, I don't need animation if I'm only updating my data daily or weekly or monthly. But if I'm updating it at a very high frequency, I think animation is beneficial because then I don't have to, go and start refreshing my report to see what's going on. And I think, and then there's the opposite side of the interaction where it really comes into play with these mobile devices, because you don't have a mouse, right? I can't pick up my mouse and start clicking on my iPad. So being able to use my swipe and being able to move around and easily interact with a report is ideal there, and is part of most mobile applications that are out there, being able to interact with them.
Right. Well, that's actually the other question that came in that I wanted to pose if we had time. Comments on BI in relation to mobile devices. So, you're talking about the interactivity factors and how to make something more of a touch interface as opposed to a pointing and clicking or keyboard interface. What are the other considerations for mobile? Are you seeing an increase, and how do you make your BI compatible with those platforms?
So I think it's a great question. I think it's hard. I think mobile BI is very cool. I think one of the issues we've seen with mobile BI is a lot of our customers don't allow mobile devices access within their VPN. And since a lot of our customers have very, very secure data and very, very secure reports, they can't necessarily leverage the mobile aspects of BI because they can't be outside of the organization and get to the network there to be able to look at their mobile animations. I do feel like if you've got something that's more high level, less secure, that you need to report on, and I know going into a board meeting, these mobile devices are great. You can break it out. You can bring up a report and quickly find and identify information on a report. So I like it. I think conceptually it's a great idea. I think time will tell a little bit, even though it's been out for a while, where we end up with it and how useful it ends up being beyond, because I think the settings that a lot of people are in where they're doing analytics and doing analysis, they have a computer.
Right. I can see where salespeople would especially love that, because there would be nothing better than going to your customer site with, some reports and some ways to show how the company's working. Like if it was a status update on their trouble tickets, if you were able to get, instant feedback and have that data available, I can see where, that would be just awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
but I think the vendors are ahead a little bit of what everyone's doing right now, which means exciting times ahead.
Right, and mobile BI is definitely a topic we could spend a lot more time on. But we have hit the 30-minute mark. We hit it about 5 minutes ago, actually. But this is a fantastic conversation, and I hope that we continue the conversation in the chat room. I'm there, Beth is there, Trish and Ben are there. So please don't go away. I want to thank everybody once again, Beth Schultz, Trisha Underwood, Ben Zenik, for a fantastic conversation, and it's not over, so we'll see you in the chat room. I'm Michael Steinhardt for All Analytics.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben and Tricia. See you on the chat board.
Sounds good.
Great, thank you, guys.